If you've done any kind of network transfer of very large files from one place to the other, you're aware that it's the original transfer of the original content that's the largest amount that needs to go. And it's no different here with replication. We have that original full backup of that virtual machine that initially needs to go over to that remote site. In some circumstances, though, your wide area network link is maybe not good enough to support that in any reasonable time frame. And so for this, we have some options in replica seeding and replica mapping that we can use to kind of cheat around actually having to send that content over the wire to that remote location. The first of these is replica seeding, which offers an out-of-band transfer option for delivering that initial full backup to the remote site. Now, this out-of-band transfer option is essentially mailing it to that remote location. And so when you're doing replica seeding, you kind of back up the virtual machine, you mail it to the other location or drive it over to that other location, you restore then the virtual machine, and then transfer only the deltas that have occurred. This then sets up the largest mass of that virtual machine to support then the further replication of just the things that have changed over time. Now, this process obviously requires you to mail or drive over that initial backup of the virtual machine. But as I said earlier, some of these virtual machines, in fact, many of these virtual machines, have a lot of similarity from one to the next. And so here we could use replica mapping, where we enable using an already existing virtual machine in that remote site as the starting point for the initial full backup. Recall that everything we've been talking about here has to do with changes from one full backup to whatever iterates past that point. And the use of change block tracking here means that we can map which blocks are similar from any virtual machine to any other virtual machine. And so this replica mapping means that if you just happen to have another similarly configured virtual machine on the other side, you can use that as the starting point to map in the differences and add or remove whatever's changed from that initial mapping to create then that initial replica. Again, most virtual machines are very similar, at least to begin with, from one VM to the next. And so as we start this process, it kind of makes sense for us to use more or less any similarly configured virtual machine as the starting point for what we intend to transfer as we then begin the replication of that unique VM instance. We'll be talking here shortly about both replica seeding and replica mapping as we begin the configuration of our first replication job.